to correct the violations. And what I'm wondering is, have they responded? And also, do you have the resources you need to identify and issue warnings to companies that may be making bogus claims, but also to take enforcement or legal action against these companies?
Thank you, Congressman, for asking that question. We're taking this extremely seriously, just like we do in all of the medical product space, but particularly during this time. I think you're highlighting a really important point, which is that we do not want false information about what works in this outbreak. We did announce that we issued these warning letters. I can get more information about the follow-up with those. I don't have that right now. But I can tell you that in all the spheres of medical products, we have a progressive approach, which includes some of the things that you've spoken about. Again, I can provide more information about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think that is important.
Yes, sir.
Also, I had received yesterday a letter responding to a letter that I and 56 colleagues had sent regarding the use of dairy terms in the labeling of non-dairy products. And I want to thank you for that response. We have a lot of dairy in my district, and the use of dairy terms on non-dairy products may cause consumers to mistakenly believe that these products have similar nutrient levels as real milk, which is not accurate. Can you provide us an update on the FDA's ongoing work to provide clarity between dairy and non-dairy products to ensure that consumers are not being misled?
Yes, sir. As I mentioned in my opening statement, one of our priorities for the upcoming year is, in fact, empowering the American consumer. And you're bringing up an excellent point, sir. We want the most accurate and up-to-date information in the hands of the American public. And I share your concern that the labeling of some plant-based dairy alternatives may lead consumers to believe that these products have the same key nutritional attributes as dairy products, even though these products can vary widely in their nutritional content. We've been working diligently. This is a fairly complicated issue, as you know, and we are evaluating and analyzing the full variety of those plant-based products to get the most up-to-date information into the hands of the American public. We're also aware, sir, of some challenges on the legal side for labeling restrictions, some challenges we've had under the First Amendment. We're working through those as well with the agency's lawyers. But we are working closely with industry on this. We want to hear from stakeholders, industry, also consumer groups, about what's the best information that we can get out. I want to emphasize also that we are a science and data-based organization, as you know, and we want the science and the data about nutritional facts labeling to be present on the labels for the American people.
Great, thank you. Also, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about when Congress passed the Drug Quality and Security Act, we recognized the need for the FDA and states to work together to ensure safely compounded medications. And the report language that we put in the recognize the revisions made in the new MOU for human compacting released in September of 2018, encouraged the FDA to work with stakeholders. And I understand that the goal is to have states sign on, but about half of the states have said that at this point they haven't signed on or aren't willing to sign on. Can you elaborate on the status on this?
Yes, sir. This is a really important point because we're trying to balance certainly the safety of compounding. As you know, there have been some high-profile outbreaks that have occurred with respect to infections and compounding, but also with not making this overly burdensome on states. We have received a lot of feedback about this, and just to make it clear from the beginning, we want every state to sign this MOU. That would be really important because we want to have the cooperation and work very closely with the states. So we're working hard on the MOU. We're looking at revisions, and we hope to be having something out in the coming months. But again, just to state, we want as many states as possible to sign this memorandum of understanding. We also understand completely that access to compounded drugs is critical for some patients, and we don't want to deny that access to those patients. So finding the right balance between safety and getting those drugs in the hands of patients will be really important. It's one of the things that we're doing in this MOU. And if I have a moment, I can just tell you some of the things that are in the MOU that might help the states. We've increased the threshold for what's called inordinate amounts to 50% from 30%, which should help a lot in terms of advancing this. We've removed the burden on the states to need to take action when a compounder distributes more than that. and we've allowed them to just notify us so that we have that information rather than they're taking action. And we've also awarded a grant to the National Association Boards of Pharmacy to actually put together an information sharing system, which we think will really help the states move forward on this important subject.
Great. Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for that added extra time.
Mr. Pocan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Just want to say you do have big shoes to fill. I think Commissioner Gottlieb is someone we all had a great working relationship, as I know we will as well. I had great respect for him. Yesterday we had him come to the Progressive Caucus and present, and you don't have a whole lot of, honestly, Trump appointees, American Enterprise Institute employees come by to the Progressive Caucus, but he got it because we respect him so much. So I look forward to having that relationship. Help me to make sure I understand this. So you said 989,000 people can get tested with the tests that are out there right now, but as I understand it, the processing, we can only process about 16,000 a day right now. So at that rate, that would take 61.81 days, and if we get up to 20,000 by the end of the week, what they're hoping for processing, that would still be 49.45 days. Is that math correct? Am I understanding that we only process that few, and that is the reality? You can have tests, but unless they're processed, they're nothing?
Congressman, I think you're heading down the right path in the way of thinking. It's complicated, as you know. There's the upfront processing of the sample where you extract out what you need to do the test, and then there's how you run the test and the process that you do. One of the things that we've done, and again, this is a dynamic process.
Just as quick as possible, because I have so many questions.
Yeah, we're expanding the platforms both on the
But where are we today? Are we at 16,000 that can be processed
I can get that information to you, sir.
But does that sound about right, 16,000?
I can't speak to the absolute number.
Have you seen Scott Gottlieb's?
I have. I have a
there?
huge amount of respect.
So
for
do you
Dr.
think he's
Gottlieb.
close to right, or do you think he's way off?
I think that I would want to get you the most accurate information possible, sir.
And I think it's really important because it appears not truthful if we say there's 989,000 people that can get tested, but you can only process 16,000 a day. That's a real problem. We have to way ramp that up. So I heard you talking about how you're giving them information, you're having them let us know if they can ramp it up. We should be aggressively ramping this up. If his numbers are right, and I would bet, I'd save my hair if either one of us had it, that he's right, because he often is. That's a real problem, and I think we should be more honest that we can't process that many. So that number should be off the top of your tongue right now. I really believe if we're going to be honest with people, this is the problem that I keep hearing from people. They feel like they're not being told the total truth. And because of that, there's a lot of misinformation. So if that 16,000 number is way off, say that. But if it's pretty close to 16,000, we need to get that kind of information out as well.
Yes, sir.
So I really appreciate that, like sooner rather than later, sort of, so we know where we're at on that. Because again, it's not fair to say there's 2.486 million tests that can cover 899,000 people. If indeed 16,000 a day, that's 2 months to process that. So I just think that's a really big asterisk, so big it barely fits in the room.
We'll get that information.
Okay,
to
thank
you.
you. Also, are we facing shortages of, and I got a few different areas. One, the reagents needed to run the coronavirus diagnostic test. Two, of the 3 drugs that people are being treated with the most, I'm going to massacre the names, but ciprofloxacin, azithromycin, and piperacillin. And the final one is it true that we're rationing sedatives necessary for people on ventilation as a result of, for example, any serious respiratory illnesses, that those are being rationed right now too? So those, I guess, the questions of the reagents, those 3 drugs, and the sedatives.
Congressman, we're aware of pressure in the supply system on the reagents for these tests. Okay. And our medical device shortage group has been 24/7 working on this issue. We have a lot of frequently asked questions on our website. I mentioned earlier today.
You just answer those questions because of my very, very limited time.
We're out there with the laboratories providing them alternatives for these reagents. When we become aware of shortages, we are going to let the American people know.
So what's the supply we have right now for reagents? We probably know that off the tip of your tongue.
So we know we've been reaching folks. We know that there are pressures, particularly around RNA.
Is that a 2-week supply? That's about what's out there right now?
Again, we have to contact multiple.
We need those. I mean, honestly, no offense, those are not answers you're giving me. Like, those should be the tip of your tongue right now. We really need to know that. How about those drugs?
We're not aware of any shortages of those drugs.
Those 3? Okay, right. And then how about, we were told there's rationing of the sedatives for people on ventilation, and there's a real concern about that.
We're not aware of any.
I'm seeing nodding heads, though, behind you from your staff. Okay. Okay, thank you. But that's the kind of stuff that daily, I'm not happy CDC's, they were going to only update every 3 days. They took numbers off. They said they're going to put them back up, but their numbers are still way off. I just think this stuff is real important for us, too. In the 30 seconds I have left, I don't know if you can answer this about you. Who's distributing tests? Who's getting the tests out there? What agency?
Right now, to public or non-public health labs?
Public.
So the public, CDC is.
Okay. Do you know this? I was told a military base in Afghanistan that's 75 miles from the Iranian border. They have people who have flu-like symptoms. They're testing negative for flu. There's 5 known coronavirus cases in an Afghan town a mile away, and they can't get tested. They have no tests for coronavirus. Do you have any knowledge of that? Because that's something that is really worrying me.
I do not, sir, but if you give us the information, we'll go to CDC and work on that.
Yeah, we've contacted the Department of Defense, and yeah, we should get that out to CDC.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry China put us behind the 8 ball on coronavirus by delaying the announcement of the disease for a month or a month and a half and arresting physicians who actually brought it to light. But that's the way communist countries work. Commissioner, on the topic of China, I think there's a note here that you've announced that foreign inspections are not going to be conducted through April 2020. You're postponing your inspections outside the U.S. Now, I've got to ask you, because China makes a significant amount of certainly raw materials for our drugs and some of our drugs. How can we possibly trust them? How can we trust the safety of the drugs and the precursors that we're going to import from China if we're not going to do inspections? I mean, the government in China has already proven they can't be trusted. I mean, they watched for a month and a half. They watched this coronavirus epidemic start that now may become a pandemic because of their actions. How can we trust them? And going to the future, what does the FDA plan to do to make sure of the security of our drug supply from Chinese bad action?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. First of all, in the current state, FDA is confident of the safety and security of the American drug supply. We acknowledge exactly what you're saying. We have postponed our surveillance inspections in China and other high-risk areas for the protection of our employees, and we're following the State Department guidance regarding travel. That being said, for for-cause inspections outside of China, we are taking those on a case-by-case basis and only looking at the most mission-critical and essential travel. We do have a number of ways that we can look at the safety and security of the drug supply. Inspections are not the only tool that we have. We have something called the PREDICT system, which is a computerized algorithm that allows us to look at where we would assess imports and inspect those imports that are coming from countries that we believe would be at the highest risk. We've updated that system to actually include the fact that we've postponed some of these inspections, and that's allowing us to change our screening approach.
Okay, thanks. Just a very brief question about the premium cigar issue, because look, we've got to go after those devices and those tobacco products that are targeted or used by young people. But I don't think premium cigars falls into that category. You know, I have a shop right down the street, and I don't see teenagers going in for it. So does the FDA plan to provide any further modifications to the applicability of the deeming rule as it relates to premium cigars? Or will the FDA consider delaying the upcoming May compliance deadlines for premium cigars until resolution can be reached on this very small subset of really adult products?
Sir, we acknowledge the importance of this issue, as well as the comments you made regarding who uses the premium cigars. As you probably know, the premium cigar issue is part of an ongoing legal action. We will maintain the May 12th, 2020 deadline. That will be maintained. We do have a number of approaches that we can use with premium cigar makers that will make it easier for them to approach this May 12th, 2020 deadline, including the substantial equivalence pathway, and we're glad to share that information.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Just briefly on naloxone co-prescription, I think naloxone is an important tool in our toolbox against deaths from the opioid epidemic. Could you please provide an update on FDA's consideration on recommending co-prescription of naloxone?
Yes, sir. This is actually, you're right, a very important issue for FDA and for the nation. We're making efforts just in generally around naloxone for that to be available on the over-the-counter market. That's one issue. Second is we have designed, tested, and validated the key labeling requirements to facilitate that. And in April, we approved the first generic naloxone, as you know. We're working hard with government officials as well as industry to for the co-developed products, sir.
But I don't understand very specifically the co-prescription, so that, and you understand, I mean,
yes,
that's
totally
one way to
understand.
get it into the hands or into those households where there is a risk because narcotics are being written into that, prescriptions are written. I mean, what is the FDA doing about co-prescription?
So we are working with industry as well as other government agencies to help in the development of that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And just finally, as you know, I'm interested in making certain that when it comes to cannabis-derived products that we make certain that they don't, I think that they should be regulated pretty broadly until we have more scientific evidence. What is the FDA doing about CBD and the very broad, I mean, I don't have my computer. I could pull up, I search for CBD. First 10 things will claim health benefits of it. What is the FDA doing?
Yes, sir. So we're taking that really seriously. As you know, we have a working group in the agency, and we just issued a report to Congress. Congress gave us money to actually do the sampling so we could have some more information. We have a knowledge gap, sir, that makes it difficult for us to know how to proceed in several areas. But what I can tell you is the following. We have taken action against companies who have made false claims about CBD products, curing cancer, treating Alzheimer's, and those are the highest risk areas. We will continue to enforce that. We are exploring the possibility of some regulatory approaches from an enforcement approach that should help us actually get to the right place and prioritize the highest risk areas.
Okay, thank you very much, and yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this hearing. Thank you for being here. Good to meet you, Commissioner Hahn. Okay, for the last week, I have been drilling down, and my staff has been working on this. I've been doing the research, trying to figure out this whole issue of hand sanitizers. Lo and behold, I learned that it's considered a drug and subject to FDA oversight. Didn't know that. Now, manufacturers are required to notify FDA if there's a permanent discontinuance or an interruption in the manufacture of a drug. Yet I then found that it's only the life-supporting or life-sustaining drugs that they're required to report shortages of. Now, given the public health emergency we're in, of course, the first priority, washing hands for 20 seconds. But second to that is the use of hand sanitizers. I have been in 3 cities, can't find hand sanitizers anywhere at all. Many communities, rural communities, unhoused people who are living on the streets, communities of color, a lot of people don't have access to water. And this is the only kind of alternative they have, and these are the directions from our own government to use. But if it's not available or if people can't afford it, what do we do? So I was looking at alternatives in New York, of course, now they're using incarcerated workers to produce their own hand sanitizer. And then I said, well, what else can we do since our own government is not telling us what to do? And I have asked Dr. Redfin, Dr. Fauci, Secretary Mnuchin, Congresswoman Nora Torres asked the Exim Bank director because we heard that, of course, the sanitizer is being exported. So I decided to try to figure out what to do myself. And so online there's a recipe for making it yourself. 2/3 cup of rubbing alcohol, 1/3 cup aloe vera gel, mixing bowl, spoon, funnel, 2-ounce spray bottle of liquid soap container, masking tape or pen. So I'm saying this to you because we're telling the public that this is important to have. It's important also, even if there's access to water, using doorknobs and, you know all of the issues. And so what in the world is going on, and why are we so quiet about it? No one could answer my question. Secretary Mnuchin just said he would take it to the task force because we were told it's the White House task force that's looking at this. But this is a big issue. It may not seem to be that big of an issue, but if people don't have access or can't wash their hands, and this is the only thing they have, and our government is telling them to use this and they can't find it, what do? Do we make our own?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. And I just want to acknowledge something that you said, which I think is very important. This is very important for the American people, and something that FDA takes seriously. It is regulated, as you say, under our authorities with drug, with CDER, the Center for Drug. And in that area, drug manufacturers are required to tell us if there are shortages. We are aware that there are pressures in the hand sanitizer manufacturing. And what we do is we proactively go to manufacturers, talk about their supply, try to match them up with the supply chain, and try to ask them and get them to ramp up the manufacturing. This occurs across the medical product sphere.
Okay, but just on hand sanitizers, this is not happening because it's not available.
So, Congresswoman, I can get you the most up-to-date information that we have about what we're hearing back from manufacturers, because we agree that getting as much out there as possible is important.
It's very important, but let me tell you, though, in the meantime, if the direction is to the public health requirements are to use hand sanitizers short of being able to wash your hands, and you can't find it, what do you tell people? What do we tell our constituents? Do you believe this recipe I just laid out serves us well? I mean, should that be posted as an alternative until the supply is there? Or what do we tell individuals now?
So your question is a good one. I don't know that recipe, and I don't want to give the American people false information about recipes, but we will look at that.
People are using this because they can't find this. And then oftentimes when you try to get it online, it's $150. I mean, go and check it out yourself. Nowhere in Washington can you find it.
Yes, ma'am.
And so FDA, and I was surprised, and so that's why I'm really glad you're here today. Now that I found that it's FDA that has the oversight responsibility, and manufacturers are required to report these shortages. But somehow you've got to get the word out to people what to do in lieu of this if, in fact, this is not available.
Yes, ma'am. We are. We have a drug and devices shortage group. They are leaning in on this. They're talking to the manufacturers every day, and we've posted on our website all the shortages that we're aware of. I can get up-to-date information to you, Congresswoman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Cuellar.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I apologize. We have Homeland, we got Defense committees, and we got Ag, of course. Dr. Hahn, again, thank you. I want to say thank you for the great work you did at the MD Anderson there at the in Texas and Houston. Appreciate all the work and what is it, about 140,000 patients that y'all look at, and people that have been suffering from cancer, and I just want to say thank you for the work that y'all do there at MD Anderson.
Thank you, sir. That was all due to the great people of the state of Texas.
Thank you so much. A couple of things. One, compounding. I understand we got to find a balance to making sure we have safety, but at the same time, if there are any folks that do have special needs, and we set up a scientific framework that works, because if you look at it, in the old days when we looked at pharmacy, that's the way they started off. I mean, that's originally, instead of going to the big companies, that's the work that used to be done, compounding. Tell us what you're doing to make sure that we set up a balanced approach and have a scientific framework that works, protect safety, but still address some of the special needs for patients.
Congressman, thank you for that question. And you are absolutely right. This has to be a balanced approach. We recognize that some Americans very much depend on compounding to get the vital medicines they need. On the other hand, we are aware of outbreaks that have occurred, safety issues that have occurred in the past regarding compounded drugs. So trying to get the most appropriate framework in place that has the balance there, ensure supply, but at the same time, make sure that it's safe as well is really important. I can tell you a few things that we're doing. We're trying to streamline the processes around this to make it easier for compounders. But also, as you know, we're working on a memorandum of understanding with the states to try to make it less burdensome on them. We're pushing that forward, hopefully in the next couple of months, but we've had to receive feedback from them, and that's appropriate, and other stakeholders to make sure we get to the right place and achieve this balance. We are continuing to create the 503 bulk substance list. As you know, compounds are nominated. We have to assess them and add them to the list, and thank you very much. Congress provided us additional funding for that, and we can hire some more people to actually expedite that. The sooner we expedite it, the better place we'll be with this. And then finally, we have created and are bolstering what we call the Compounding Center of Excellence, which really will help us put a lot of resources together and address this really important issue.
Well, thank you for that work. Let me bring it to the opioid crisis. Smaller communities are really being hit hard, and just want to see what we're doing to address the issue. I know all of us have been talking about coronavirus, but we still have so many people that died from opioid overuse. Can you tell us what y'all are doing to address that issue, and especially helping the small communities?
Yes, sir. You are absolutely right. It's not as if the other issues and challenges that face us go away during coronavirus, and this would be one of them. Just quickly, my perspective on this is as a cancer doctor who completely understands the need for a balance between making sure these opioids are in the hands of people who need them, but at the same time making sure that we're trying to reduce the dependence on these. And there's a couple of areas that we are working on. One, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on naloxone, both as the combination products, but also getting an over-the-counter naloxone. This is the reversal agent for opioids, which would be a really important thing. We're also working in chronic pain. So how do we develop abuse deterrent drugs? Not we, but innovators around the country to actually get them on the marketplace to help with what we know are the known factors associated with abuse. I think it's also really important. We're encouraging manufacturers and research in the area of non-opioid approaches for chronic pain because, as you know, sir, that's where we've often seen some of the problems with the epidemic is in the chronic pain situation. And this is an all-of-agency effort, and we are definitely taking this seriously. And just to express to small as well as large communities our concern for this and our ongoing effort to make sure this is a top priority for us.
Right. And I certainly understand. Right now the media attention, the members of Congress, the general public is on the coronavirus, a serious situation. But at the same time, we still got other issues that we need to continue working. So to your men and women that do a good job, thank you so much, and good to see another Texan.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. Dr. Hahn, there's been a great deal of press attention on the shortage of the N95 respirator mask in the marketplace and in the strategic national stockpile. We have a national shortage partly due to China shutting down exports of masks that are manufactured there. HHS says that we have about 1% of what we would need in a pandemic. As medical devices, N95 masks are under FDA's jurisdiction. Does FDA know what the supply of those masks is? Can you tell us the most important things that Congress can do to help you address existing and potential interruptions in the supply of medical products in the United States? The budget request includes a legislative proposal to require medical device manufacturers to notify FDA of potential supply shortages, just as drug manufacturers do. The emergency supplemental provides funding to assist FDA with supply chain interruption work, but it did not provide the requested legislative authority. Do you still believe that the legislation is needed even with the additional funds that we provided last week? And to get something through Congress fast, would it make sense to limit such legislation to products that the Secretary deems needed for the outbreak and perhaps to sunset it after the outbreak ends while we consider long-term measures?
Thank you, sir, for that question. And yes, we still believe that our requests around legislative authority on devices where masks would be in part of are necessary so that we have a more accurate picture of the supply chain. You bring up a very good point, sir, and this is true for other devices as well as the N95 masks. So just a little background, the N95 masks, there are two different types. One are FDA authorized for the medical situation, and the other are for industrial, authorized by NIOSH. There is one important difference between the two, and that is high volume or high pressure spray of volume of liquids, such as in the operating room if you're a surgeon and blood's coming your way. So that's the major difference. What we did to try to increase the supply of these masks is issue some regulatory flexibility. That was Monday a week ago, to let medical providers know that they should follow the CDC revised guidance about this. You can use either one of those two types of masks, and there's a lot more of those other masks available than the surgical ones that I mentioned. You can use those other masks in the non-surgical setting. It's all according to the CDC guidance. And we believe that flexibility should help. I also understand that there are some liability issues around this that manufacturers have mentioned, and that is a separate subject than what FDA does. I can tell you, sir, that we are in constant touch with manufacturers over the respirator N95 issue. We know that there are spot shortages. We know that there are a shortening of the supply chain associated with this, and there's demand. We're staying on top of it. If any shortages are identified by FDA, we will let the American public know.
Okay. Let me switch gears for a moment. The safety of our food supply is very important, and we've undoubtedly made improvements in our food safety systems. Recent recalls, of course, are reminders that we still have work to do. Key indicators of FDA's performance are down significantly between 2018 and 2019, notably domestic inspections down 18%, import visual exams down 25%, and import samples down 21%. Congress has funded over 2,700 human food FTEs for the Office of Regulatory Affairs to address this. Unfortunately, at the end of calendar year 2019, the Office of Regulatory Affairs has only allocated 785 positions for the compliance and inspection staff, not to include import and lab staff, who work on food safety. What accounts for the declines in inspections in recent years in domestic inspections, import exams, and import analysis? And what accounts for their not filling positions in human food inspection and compliance activities?
Sir, I'll address the filling positions issue first, because that is a critical need at the agency. We spent a lot of time since my arrival at the end of December looking at the issue of human resources and hiring qualified people to do these inspections. We've made a substantial amount of progress in the last 2 months, but we have a lot more progress to do to get the appropriate people here. And so we are doing everything we can to ramp up the number of inspectors. The volume of food that comes into this country, both from an import point of view but also domestically produced, is substantial. We have a couple of different ways that we're approaching this in addition to inspections. And one of the things that we asked for is additional funding for an artificial intelligence-based approach to this so that we can keep up with the demand around inspections. What this will do is allow us to better target where we need to do the inspections and where it's best for us to look so that we have more information. We've done a pilot around this, and we've actually determined that we think this can substantially increase our ability to do that.
We've funded 2,700 FTEs, but you're only utilizing 785 positions.
We are, sir, we are working very hard to fill those positions. We have cleared a lot of obstacles just recently on that. The other point I want to make is that we do depend upon and are work very closely with our state partners to do these inspections as well.
Okay, we'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Mr. Adeholt?
Thank you. Oh, Dr. Hahn, I'm aware that there are therapeutic antibodies that can be used to treat some viruses. Is the use of these therapeutic antibodies something that could be treat COVID-19?
Sir, we have been approached by innovators, by developers around this. So there's a class of drugs called antiretrovirals, drugs that would treat a specific virus, and in this case, coronavirus. There are monoclonal antibodies, as you describe, that would be another step in the treatment. We are aware of innovators, and I can't give you specific details about that because of confidential commercial information, who are also looking in that space. And we've been approached by many, and I mean many, groups, innovators, manufacturers around all of these particular therapeutics. And then, of course, we have the vaccines, which is a much longer-term thing. Across that entire spectrum of treatment, the antiretrovirals, the monoclonal antibodies, and the vaccine, we are accelerating our work with the manufacturers to get as much regulatory clarity, but also to help them with the development process and to get them into patients as quickly as possible. Obviously, some of these are new and unproven therapies. They're going to have to go through clinical testing in order to get them into patients on a routine basis.
Is there anything that can be done to help sort of a rapid grant emergency use approval to ramp up this manufacturing?
We would love to work with Congress on this. Right now, we have the appropriate tools and people to actually interact. We would love to share ideas with you, sir, about what more could be done to accelerate this. This is, as you can imagine, with the group behind me, a top priority in terms of trying to accelerate the development of these therapeutics.
And we've heard that media reports that blood banks across the country are experiencing shortages. To our knowledge, individuals cannot get affected with COVID-19 through a blood transfusion, is my understanding. Can you tell us if you've heard from blood banks and if they're experiencing any shortages?
Congressman, thank you very much for asking that question. First of all, you're absolutely right. We have no evidence that COVID-19 is transmitted through blood and the blood supply. No evidence of that. Secondly, we are aware, and it's happened within the last several days, that there are some concerns about people not donating blood because of the restrictions that we might have on group gatherings, et cetera. Consistent with local health authority recommendations, we encourage Americans to continue to donate blood because this is a vital issue for many Americans around the country. So let me just state that again. Consistent with local health recommendations about what sort of settings folks should go to, we encourage Americans to continue to donate blood and blood products.
Okay. And of course, I know your background is not infectious diseases, but rather oncology. But could you tell us, give us a comparison from what your understanding is from as a medical doctor and in research you've done, what the casualty rate for just the regular virus is, as opposed to COVID-19, for especially, say, over 65, 70 years of age?
So the White House COVID-19 task force is working on this. Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci are definitely leaning in on this and are doing the modeling associated with this. I can tell you in broad scale because, as you point out, I'm definitely not an infectious disease doctor. It's the following. This appears to be a particularly problematic and lethal virus for elderly and those with underlying immunodeficiency states, those who are getting chemotherapy, those with other coexisting medical problems, in some cases severe diabetes, dialysis, et cetera. So the mortality rate seems to be higher in those patients. Interestingly enough, and a welcome bit of information is younger folks often don't even know they have it, even though they've got infected. Now, the interesting thing about that is that's both a good thing because we don't want them to be sick, but also a negative because people don't know that they've been infected. With respect to the mortality, there is a range here. You probably know that there's a range of number of people who die of flu every year, and that can be 10, 20,000 according to CDC statistics, all the way up to 65 to 70,000. I don't yet have, and I believe Dr. Birx and Fauci are working on this, the estimates for the exact mortality rate associated with COVID-19. We believe that it's going to be relatively close or perhaps even higher than a bad flu outbreak. But again, I would recommend, sir, that we wait for Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx to finish their modeling and let the American people know.
Do you know what, for the regular flu, what, for those that are, say, over age 70, what the regular flu, the casualty rate is at?
So we know that from the CDC data that those numbers can vary between 0.1 and 0.4. We also know that it can be significant in the elderly. I can take that question to Dr. Redfield and get an accurate answer for you, sir.
Yeah, and I'd like to know what compared to, say, what with a diagnosis of with the coronavirus, how that compares to that age group. You know, if it's, you say 0.4, 0.8, whatever percentage it is for a regular virus, the normal virus that is very common, as opposed to what the coronavirus would be, and how those two numbers compare.
Yes, sir. I will ask Dr. Redfield, Fauci, and Birx to get those data, and as soon as they're available from them, we'll make sure that you all have that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Pingree.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to take an entirely different tack here. So a brief moment of not talking about the coronavirus. One of my colleagues brought up CBD, and I know I saw the pained look on your face when that came up. I do appreciate that you submitted the report to Congress last week. It's an issue that's been of great concern to my constituents, to the hemp growers around the country. It's, as you know, complicated and it's been challenging. I think many of us were disappointed that the report didn't provide more clarity and concrete steps forward. I know you're focused on safety, and you know, you reiterated in your testimony today about the companies that are marketing products and the many ways that human and animal health may be put and safety may be put at risk. But you haven't taken any robust action to issue regulatory guidance that would clear the market. I know you've written some letters, but it doesn't seem like that's enough. And aren't you concerned that having no guidance and no, total inaction is actually worse for public health and safety than if you did do something? I mean, right now it's just out there and there are false claims and people are unsure what to do. So how do you see this timeline moving forward?
Congresswoman, thank you for the question, and I did appreciate our conversation about this. And as we discussed, and as I mentioned previously, there has to be a balanced and pragmatic approach here. These products are out there, and we have to acknowledge that. The American people are telling us that they want to use these products because they think they're beneficial. We want to make sure that we have the data to inform those decisions. I'm thinking particularly in the dietary supplement side of the world. So we're exploring this enforcement guidance, just as you state, to provide some clarity. Clarity to the American people, clarity to the industry. It's taken us a bit of time within the agency to get to this point. I'm pretty comfortable that we are going to work forward in the next few months to actually get this. We're working through the process within the department and the White House to get to that point, and it will be a balanced approach, acknowledging the fact that you can't make claims about cancer, Alzheimer's, et cetera, really can't target vulnerable populations, pregnant, lactating women, teething rings for babies, and other vulnerable populations, but that we know there's agents out there that people believe could be helpful, and we need to gather data and do research. And so a major part of our effort is to actually do that and kind of figure out what we can tell the American people. And then what do we do moving forward? Is it more on the enforcement prioritization? Is it rulemaking? We don't want to rush to that judgment until we have the data to make the right decision, but acknowledging 100% what you're saying, which is more clarity is needed regarding this from this agency.
And just to be clear, I have a tremendous number of constituents who see an enormous amount of value in the product and, as you said, are already using it for a whole variety of reasons. I have people who are producing the product, and I think one of the challenges is to the legitimate growers, legitimate manufacturers right now, sort of knowing that there's just such a plethora of stuff out there and claims out there. It makes it hard for the serious producers to really move forward. We put the FY21 budget requests $5 million, and how do you see that being helpful to accelerate your process? Is that enough money? You know, where are we with supporting this effort?
Thank you very much for that, because one of the things, I mean, the critical need here, besides getting the enforcement policy forward and providing regulatory clarity, is conducting the research and gathering the data. We've opened a portal to collect data. We would very much value working with legitimate manufacturers to see how we could gather those data about safety and efficacy. We are so interested in bringing that forward, putting that together, and helping us inform the right way to move forward. We're interested in learning about manufacturing. What are the best manufacturing principles? Making sure that the content is what it is and what it's said to be. All those things need to be addressed moving forward. So we're going to use the funds both from an informatics point of view, but also to do the research and data collection.
I understand that the UK Food Safety Agency recently provided some advice on the upper limits. Do you communicate with other countries and how they're looking at this, EU counterparts? Do you imagine that there would be an upper limit guidance?
It's a really good question. We have looked at this internally, and I think the context here is really important. As you know, CBD, and yes, we've talked to other regulators. I can answer that up front. I'm sorry for, but as you probably know, CBD has gone through as an active pharmaceutical agreement through the pharmaceutical or through a drug pathway, and is a part of an approved drug for the treatment of 2 very serious pediatric seizure disorders. Right. What we've learned from that is that we do have to be careful on the safety side. Those drugs are terrific for these indications, but it has given us some insight into this. It would be very difficult and not a lot of science and data behind being able to establish that upper limit at this point. And we don't want to put something out that unnecessarily either restricts but also perhaps makes a mistake on the safety side as well. I don't see that happening right now until we gather additional information.
Great. Well, I yield back, and thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. Dr. Hahn, 2017 HHS Inspector General report on FDA's domestic food safety inspections included a number of troubling findings, such as, 1, the FDA wasted its inspectors' time going to facilities were out of business or not operating. 2, even when inspectors found very serious violations, FDA did not always take action to remedy the problem, often relying on voluntary actions by the facility. And 3, that the FDA consistently failed to conduct timely follow-up inspections. In half of the cases, FDA took no action within a year, and in 17% of the cases, it never did a follow-up inspection. What corrective steps has FDA taken to address these Inspector General findings?
So thank you for that question. We take very seriously the Inspector General's findings around this. We discussed earlier that we are hiring inspectors. We're increasing the training of inspectors. We're using other techniques, artificial intelligence, et cetera, to actually buff up the approach that we're taking and have a more targeted approach to this where there's the highest risk associated with the products. But again, sir, I want to acknowledge the fact that we totally hear you about those, and we are working internally to address all of those and increasing our capacity to do the appropriate inspections.
Thank you. The dietary supplement industry has ballooned since passage of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in 1994. This is a $60 billion market, but we don't actually know how many products are out there. Because manufacturers are not required to notify FDA of the products that they make. Your budget asks Congress for the authority to require the disclosure of this information. This is known as product listing. Can you tell us more about why this proposal is needed and what the benefits will ultimately be?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you because you've totally laid out the issue here for the agency. You're right, this is a pretty big industry, and we have limited authorities and resources, really haven't kept up with the quickly expanding marketplace that we see. And, you know, the American public depends upon us to help reassure them about the safety of some of these products. It's becoming increasingly complicated.